Channel NITT viewers, I am DS, your psychologist, and welcome to another episode on Channel NITT. So the topic for today is SI blind spot. So all ENTJs have SI as their blind spot because SI happens to fall in the 7th position of the cognitive stack. So in this episode, I'm going to share with my viewers how SI as a blind spot manifests in my everyday life. And my SI blind spot is very serious. Why? Because I allocate much more resources to NI than to SE. So consequently, I have very little resources for the 7th function, which is SI. Under normal circumstances, as I go about my everyday life, I do not really care about SI much.
But I don't care what they say, I'm in love with you.
So again, let me reiterate, my SI is very blind. So if you are an ENTJ yourself, you might find that my SI blind spot is really a very serious blind spot. And if you are a viewer looking at the ENTJ, not all ENTJs are going to have this serious an SI blind spot. So one curious observation that I have made about SI as a blind spot is that I tend to be able to remember to remind others of things. For example, hey, before you leave, bring the umbrella. Hey, before you leave, remember to tap out. But for myself, I always forget it. So there are a lot of times I can leave my house, I'm already downstairs, then I realize, oops, I forgot my phone. Oops, I forgot my key. I have to go all the way up to retrieve it. But funny thing is, I can remember to remind others, hey, don't forget this. Why? This is because TE is my dominant function. TE remembers to think from the other people's point of view. But seldom do I think about my own point of view. So in a very curious way, my SI blind spot is less serious when I'm around others. Why? Because I do not want to inconvenience others due to my TE dominant function. So for example, if I accidentally spill a drink while having dinner with my friends, I would immediately clean up. Why? Because I do not want to inconvenience others. However, if I were eating alone and I spilled my drinks, I'll just leave it. This is not double standard. Basically, this is TE at work. I want to make the dinner a very enjoyable experience for my friends. However, if I'm alone, SI blind spot kicks in. It's like, okay, never mind. It's okay. Because SI can be very concerned about sequences and rituals. A second thing to note about the SI blind spot for the ENTJ is that the ENTJ is very bad at performing rituals.
Only 3 things you need to do it just like me. Count it like 1, 2, 3.
So a lot of times, my sister has told me, okay, now I give you this set of toiletries. First you use the cleanser, then you use the moisturizer, then you use this and that. Well, they even label, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the steps in which I have to use. Still, I cannot follow the rituals. So a lot of times, I cannot keep up with cleaning regimes. What happens? I just use the facial products anyhow I like. So one day I can go and say, okay, I decide to use a cleanser. Or I just apply moisturizer without the cleanser. So the inability of the ENTJ to follow regimes or follow routines is also reflected in my exercise endeavors. So I tried to consult somebody who gave me some advice on what I could do at home to have a flatter tummy. So he says, okay, do sit-ups, 15 sit-ups, then 20 push-ups, then don't know what. So what actually happens is, cannot follow again. So not only for facial and exercises, I also cannot follow routines when it comes to medication. So when the doctor says, okay, you must complete this course, it usually goes not completed. So one point to note is, a lot of people might at this point in time think that I am SI inferior. But this is definitely not SI inferior, because if I am SI inferior, then I have NESE dominant function. But if you know me well enough, NE is never something that I associate myself with. So MBTI profilers must be careful, because you might identify a function that this individual might be weak in, but it's actually a blind spot, not an inferior function. So moving on, a third aspect of my SI blind spot is that I tend to overbuy things. Why? Because I forget where my things are. So I can buy a lot of marker cartridges because as a lecturer, I tend to use the whiteboard a lot. So I have a lot of cartridges, and then when I buy like dozens. The unfortunate thing is, after opening the packet of the dozen, I use 2, I forget where the other 10 are. Then I have to buy some more. Until one day I finally uncover where I have actually placed the 10.
So many faces, so many places. Said it's hard to track.
So you can say that as an ENTJ, I am very clumsy and muddle-headed. Of course, is it true that an ENTJ can never follow rituals? No. There are rituals that I keep up with every day because they are meaningful for me. Like for example, I keep track of my expenses every day. I also keep track of my YouTube performance every day. So I will meticulously go and put in this data every day. Though not at the same time of the day. But I would definitely do it by the end of the day. Similarly, I might not really bother about cartridges, but there are important things that I want to safekeep. I will place them in a special place that I know only. Talking about this, I am very bad at passwords. So now we are living in a high-tech era where every app, every account requires you to have a password, right? The ENTJ, me lah, okay, is very weak at passwords. So the problem with me is that I try not to have the same password for every account. And when I start a new password, I forget where this password is. I can write them in a book. Okay, for this account, this is the password. The problem is, I forget where I place the book. So I have a lot of exercise books where I write passwords. And in a particular page, it's not even in the first page or last page, it's somewhere in the middle. No, just want to be secretive, you know. And I'm so secretive until I cannot remember where I put my things.
You're unbelievable.
So having too many accounts where I need password is really a very frustrating experience for me. So fellow ENTJs, do you have the same problem? A fifth manifestation of an SI blind spot for me is that I cannot read long text. I just cannot read. So when people send me very long SMSs, very long text on WhatsApp, I just don't have this. So I have friends who send me very long text. They send me an entire story, forwarded or otherwise, telling me about their personal experiences. I do not have the patience to read through everything. Why? Because of TE. Efficiency, like just tell me what the ending is, right? So I do have some friends who want to tell me their experiences or their life stories, or they met this particular person and then they start telling in detail what happened during the encounter. Usually I will say fast forward please. So in the end, what happened? So for me, SI blind spot means that I like to skip the steps in between and directly go to the end. Of course, this will be very frustrating for many users, especially the FE and FI users, who just want to share their story. Of course, under normal circumstances, I just go about my everyday life, not using SI, or paying very little attention to SI. However, is SI never activated at all? Definitely not. When the situation arises where it is going to be serious, there's an impact, surely I will use SI. For example, during examinations.
Dad, what's the government examination for exactly?
So during examinations, if I have the time and if the examination is important for me, I will definitely check and check again. So in my personal experience as an ENTJ up to my undergraduate years, I have never left the hall until the last minute, except for one paper, and it's only a pass-fail option, so it's not very important. And that was the only time I ever left the hall early. Otherwise, I would always check. So in this regard, SI gives me a form of security that I am being conscientious, that I am doing my part as a student. However, SI is not necessarily a good thing because there are a lot of times where I amended my MCQ answers which were originally correct and I doubted myself and answer became wrong. I also remember the time when I was primary 4, there is a component where they put into the report book handwriting. They give a grade for handwriting. What actually happened was, because it is going to be on the report book, I became extremely careful. So I wrote so carefully that it is actually very ugly handwriting. You know, handwriting is supposed to be very natural, right? When you just write. My handwriting was so ugly because I was extremely careful that I got a B. I thought if I had just written naturally, like normal, I would have gotten an A. So in a way, SI is not really my ally. So viewers, do you have this kind of problem that I have? Regardless of whether you are an ENTJ or any other MBTI type, do share with me. Okay, I hope that you have enjoyed this episode as well. If you have not subscribed, do consider subscribing so that we can bring you more ENTJ and MBTI. Okay, I am going to sign off now and I'll see you in my next episode. Goodbye!